Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Born from Sin. I'm your host, Danielle. Happy New Year. We are officially 2026, and I do apologize because normally I would have had a podcast out for you guys last week, which would have been January the 1st, which I technically recorded on December the 28th. But unfortunately, because there's been some changes on the platform, I messed up because I'm not very tech savvy. And I joined my recording as a guest instead of as the host. So my entire session I ended up having to wipe it out after 2 or 3 days trying to figure out why it wouldn't load. And here we are. So I do apologize that I messed up last week and that you guys didn't get a podcast, but here we are. So I hope that the start of your year has been good so far. I hope that you had a fantastic Christmas. And today I want to talk to you about mental health. And that's exactly what I was going to post last week. So here we go. When I first started receiving counseling, I was about 11 years old. And back then, it was very difficult to get in to see a counselor. But because of the situation that I was going through court because we had just had my dad charged with sexually abusing me for so many years. And because of that, I was court mandated to go for counseling. So I was able to get in fairly quickly. And again, back in the day, it wasn't very easy to get in to see a counselor because there wasn't that many mental health experts around back in the day. I still remember the lady that I went to go see. I was living in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, and her name was Connie Nadeau. And I remember the first time I went in there, I was very angry. I didn't want to be there, although the court said I had to be. I felt like I was being punished for speaking up and talking about the abuse that I'd gone through with my dad. And it was a very uneasy feeling having to go talk to a stranger and repeat everything that you just had to tell the police officers, which you're already uncomfortable about. Being 11 years old, it's not easy to sit there and go into details about the abuse that you had been through. So when I had my first few counseling sessions with Connie, it was a lot of me talking about what I had gone through and, going into details. It was more or less a way for her to help me get through what I was about to go through in court because I was going to have to sit there at the age of 11 and have a conversation with these lawyers and these jurors that I've never seen these people before, and I had to sit there and tell them all the horrific stuff that my father did to me. So during my counseling sessions with Connie, she had the tendency to help me when it came to things that I could expect to hear in court or questions that I could expect to be asked while I was on the stand. And after about, I don't know, a month of going through this, I started getting very angry because I didn't really feel like I was being helped. It felt like this woman was just telling me what I should say or what I shouldn't say or how I should say it. And I didn't really feel like anybody was still listening to me when it came to the abuse that I was going through and how the heck was I supposed to get through the rest of this, like the after this, what happens? And one day I decided during one of our sessions, I had a breakdown. It was probably my very first breakdown. I was 11 years old and I was so angry. And I remember yelling at her and asking her, how dare you, or saying to her, how dare you sit there and tell me that's going to be okay? How dare you sit there and tell me that I'm going to get through this? How do you know How do you know that? How do you know that something bad's not going to happen to me later on? How do you know? Why do you keep telling me these things? I don't understand. And she literally looked at me and said, because I've been where you are. And I think that was the biggest impact of our entire counseling session was her telling me that she understood where I was coming from. She grew up with an alcoholic father as well. She grew up in an abusive situation, so she actually understood what I was telling her. And although it didn't seem like she was giving me useful information, she actually was. And I thank her to this day because if it wasn't for her, I don't know how I would have gotten through court and many other things that happen later on in life without her guidance. And back in the day, again, we didn't have a lot of mental health care professionals, and it was very difficult to get in to see somebody. And then when I turned 16, I ended up having to go in for counseling again. At that point in my life, I was very, very depressed. I had just been rejected by my father again after going up to see him in Toronto and him wanting to have nothing to do with me. When finally made it back to Sudbury a week later, um, I attempted suicide because I was that depressed. And I ended up in a mental institute for about a month. And it was all teenagers that were there. During my time there, I ended up having to go through different group therapy, which was a little bit different for me compared to the one-on-one that I had when I was younger. So it was the first time group therapy. And I think that's when I came to the realization that maybe my life wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Now, don't get me wrong, I went through a lot. Um, and as I was sitting there listening to these other teenagers my age, and I realized that the abuse that they were going through, I had already been through all of that. I was way past that stage. And it made me realize that I was a little bit stronger than I thought I was. And that's what helped me get out of there was my strength, my determination that no, I was not going to continue going down this path. I was not going to be like my mother and be suicidal every other month or every other week because I was better than that. I deserved better than that. And I was not going to allow myself to go down that dark path anymore. Mental health professionals back then, like back in the 80s, were far and few in between. It was very hard to get in to see someone for counseling. I ended up going for counseling again when I was in my 30s. I was with the father of my youngest child, and we had a very up and down relationship. When things were good, they were good. When he was a good man, he was a good man. Um, he was always good with the kids as far as not, beating on them, or physically abusing them. Me, however, different story. Him and I would literally have fist fights. Um, we would push each other's buttons to the point where, he would start shoving me, I'd shove him back, he'd take a swing, I'd take a swing back. One night, after having one of our very regular arguments, I was leaving the bedroom. I was going to go upstairs to use the bathroom, and I had to cut through the recording studio that we had downstairs at the time. I'm heading upstairs, and he grabs me, and he pulls me back by my hair, slams me down on the cement floor, and starts smashing my head off the cement floor. And it was at that very moment that I thought for sure I was going to die. I thought for sure that my children and stepchildren were going to wake up the next day with me being dead. And that's all that was going through my mind. My life did not even flash before my eyes. That's literally the only thing that went through my mind, is how terrorized these children were going to be finding out that the police are there because I'm dead downstairs. When I finally escaped his grip and flipped him off of me and got myself away from him, I went upstairs, locked myself in the bathroom. And it was about an hour before I came out, and he sat at the door the entire time, waiting, promising that he was sorry, that it wouldn't happen again, that he lost his cool, yada, 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 the same old, same old. And at that very moment, sitting behind that locked door in my bathroom, I decided that I did not want to be in that relationship anymore. I did not want to be in a relationship like my parents were in. I didn't want to go. I already went through abuse as a child. I didn't want to have to go through it as an adult as well. So the following day, I ended up calling my stepkid's mom, told her what was going on, asked her when she could come pick up the three kids. I did not want to call the police until they were out of the house. I did not want them to see their father taken away. I had been through that. I didn't want to put them through that. And I knew that their mom, because she was a fantastic woman, may she rest in peace, I knew that she would be there to pick those kids up. So once they were out of the house, I got myself and my two children out of there. My oldest daughter went and stayed with her dad, and I took my youngest child with me, and we left. We went to actually go stay at my mom's place, and that's when I called the police. And because of, having to go into the police station and so on and so forth, I ended up having to, give my statement and what was going on. And again, it ended up being court ordered that I went to counseling. Now, at that point in time, there were a lot of counselors out there. There were quite a few. Um, it wasn't as difficult to get into, have an appointment. And so a lot more people were having like group therapies and stuff like that. So I ended up going, I had the choice of doing one-on-one counseling or doing a group counseling. I went with one-on-one at first. And then after speaking to the counselor, she's the one that suggested that maybe doing an extra month of counseling, trying out one of the groups, might help me a little bit more. So I did. And I'm very thankful that I did. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about red flags and what to be aware of. I learned a lot about grounding exercises and how to keep your mind focused and, be in the now and not in the past. I learned a lot from those programs. I think the biggest thing that I learned, again, was how strong I was. I sat there listening to these other women that were being terrorized by their husbands or their spouses, and they kept wanting to go back. And I think in an abusive relationship, that's probably one of the biggest things that people don't understand. Why do they always go back? I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. I've heard someone talking about, they were helping out a friend and they did everything that they possibly, could for them, by taking them in and getting them out of an abusive situation, and then they went back. And now they're done with this person because they refuse to help them anymore. I get that. I do. I do understand how frustrating it can be for somebody that you're trying to help that just doesn't seem to want the help or to grasp the situation. of how much danger that, they're currently in, and you're trying to get them out of that. So, for anybody that's ever, asked that question, why? It's because for someone like me, I can't answer for everybody here, but for someone like me, it was because I believed that my spouse could change. I see my father change. My father went from a narcissistic alcoholic that raped and abused me and my mom in every way, shape, and form that you can think of, change. So I figured that, maybe if I gave him another chance, he would change. And again, the abuse started off light. It was a shove. Oh, I'm sorry. Kisses and flowers the next day, it won't happen again. Then a month later, it was a punch. Sorry, won't happen again. Kisses, chocolates, and flowers. And then it just escalated. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And although it took me 6 years to realize that this man was never going to change when it came to him and I, it took me 6 years to finally get myself in the mental state of being able to get out of there and not want to go back because I knew that he could not change. There was no way until he accepted that he had a problem, there was no way he was going to change. And I was free to finally walk away from that. And I did. And I stayed away. Let me tell you, stayed away hard. But I sat there listening to these other women that were still where I was like 6 years ago when my relationship first started out. And it pained me to see how many women were struggling with going back, knowing that 5, 6 years down the road, if they survived their abuse, they'd probably be sitting in the same chair again, talking with a whole group of new people, and they're going to be in my shoes because they're not going to want to go back. The last time that I reached out for help was shortly after we moved here to New Brunswick. And although I had been through a lot of counseling for a lot of the abuse that I had been through, and I had healed through a lot of that trauma, and I mean a lot of it. The only stuff that I still hadn't really, I don't know, handled fully was my situation with my mom and her schizophrenia because she was still alive at that point in time. So I was still kind of, bound to her. So when I found out in 2018 that my parents were biological brother and sister, it was shortly before we had actually moved to New Brunswick. But a year later, we make the move out here, and I'm now being faced with what seems like people not wanting to be around me because they found out the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And then the pandemic happened, so that just kept everybody apart, right? So, anyways, I ended up having to reach out for help after I found out about my parents because I had a very dirty feeling, and it wasn't physical. It wasn't like I went outside and rolled around in the mud and I hopped in the shower and washed off the dirt. It was emotional. And it's not something that you just wash away with soap. It takes time. So, when I went in for help here in New Brunswick, there's a whole lot of people that are waiting for counseling because there is such a big shortage in mental health care compared to what there used to be. A lot of these counselors and professionals have burnt out over the years, and I can't say that I blame them after listening to many horrifying stories. I'm pretty sure that affected their mental health as well, right? So again, I was offered one-on-one and group counseling. I went for my very first one-on-one session, and I never went back to a one-on-one session after that. And the reason being is because all I was trying to, I don't know, get help with was, I don't know, a little bit of direction, just to try and figure out how to be normal. And when I said that to the counselor, she had the audacity to look at me and say, "You're never going to be normal." All right, well, how do you know that? Did you even ask me what normal was? I'm not asking you to magically wave a wand and make all my trauma disappear. That's not going to happen. I already know that. What I'm asking you is to help me with some kind of a direction. Help me figure out how to get up every morning or whatever kind of thing and have a little bit of friggin' joy in my life so that I can have a normal 9 to 5 job like everybody else and go do it without being bothered by all the crap that's going on in my head right now. Is that so hard? I don't think so. But because you're refusing, telling me that I'm never going to have normal, well, then I'm not going to sit here and listen to you because I have nothing more to say to you, and you obviously have nothing more to say to me that's going to help me. So I ended up going to the group sessions, and this woman was not there, thankfully, because I probably would have walked out of that too. I don't know. I'm very strong-minded when it comes to certain things or whatever. And if you're gonna sit there and tell me I can't have a normal life when all it is just figuring out a way to friggin' get up and function every day, but you think otherwise, well, then you're not really listening to what I'm telling you, so I'm not gonna waste your time or mine by any means. So I ended up going for the group sessions, and it was supposed to be like 2 months long. I ended up going for about a month. And then I kind of stopped because I was at a point where people were starting to share their stories. And just like any other group session that I've been in, I sat there realizing, like, holy jeez, maybe I'm just kind of, not that my feelings aren't legit, but maybe I'm just kind of overthinking this a little too much. Maybe I have all the tools that I actually need to get through this myself. And guess what? I did. Totally got through it. Um, and it's not that I don't still struggle because I do. Like I struggle with my mental health sometimes daily. This morning was a perfect example. I was very frustrated knowing that I still had to do my podcast. I had tried to record this session yesterday. And again, because of the changes on the platform, I clicked the wrong button and I messed up and it ended up not recording. And this one here is for sure recording. So, it messes with your mind because you're like, it's frustrating and you get down on yourself and you're kicking yourself in the butt for making a mistake and failing when if you could have just paid a little bit more attention, you wouldn't be in the situation that you are in right now, right, Danielle? And as I was scrolling through my Facebook, which I do every day, I came across some memories. And it was a year ago today that we lost our cat, Sassy. And I don't know, when I woke up this morning, I just felt very glum. Like, I know I was frustrated about the whole podcast, and I was kind of like, ugh, I felt like I had been defeated by that. But it was just, there was something more that was just pulling me down. I just couldn't shake it. For the life of me, I could not shake it. And then when I was scrolling on Facebook and it came up in my memories that today was the day that we lost our sassy girl, that's that's when it hit me. And I had a good cry because I miss her. She was the most beautiful cat. Like, funniest little girl ever. She loved to play peekaboo. She was always by my side. She always knew when I was having a rough day. I miss her. Oh, I miss her so much. But, again, sometimes we don't realize why we're feeling the way that we feel, why we just feel so glum, and then all of a sudden it hits you out of nowhere, and you're like, ugh, that's why. There's always a reason for it. So if your mind's ever, you wake up and you feel very overwhelmed with the day and you don't know why, kind of try to search back on what would have happened on this particular day last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Your body and your brain are reacting to a moment that it never kind of got past. So now it's going to react the same way until you acknowledge the fact that, ah, that's why I'm feeling like this. And you process it. And maybe next year when I wake up on this day, I'll be like, oh yeah, the day that Sassy passed away. And I'm still going to be sad because I'm going to miss her forever. But at the same time, hopefully I won't wake up feeling so, ugh, like I did today. So no matter what point you are at right now in your life with your mental health, whether you are struggling and debating on whether or not you should pick up the phone, do it. It might take you, a month to get in. It might take you a week. It might take you a day. Do it. Pick up that phone and do it because you are already noticing that you need help. It's one of the biggest benefits ever. You being able to recognize that you need help. And it might not be for anything major. Maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe you're just going through a hard time at work. You have a difficult coworker, or something's going on at home, or something's going on in the family, and you need help. Reach out and get the help that you need. Take the step. Do yourself a big favor in 2026 and get your mental health right. Get your healing journey on track. And while you're waiting to go in for counseling, whether it's going to be a month from now, a week from now, a year from now, depending on where you live, please feel free to go on my Facebook. I post stuff about mental health every single day because mental health to me is big. Like I don't know some days how I made it as far as I have. I really don't. But let me tell you, now that I am completely free of my parents' story, of my parents' lies, of just all of it, the abuse, the schizophrenia, I'm just free. I have such a huge weight lifted off my shoulders that I see a positivity in me that I've never seen before. And it comes from being almost fully healed. Because I'll never be fully healed. Like I don't know if people ever get to a point where they're fully healed. At one point in time, something's gonna slap you in the face again later on down the road. And those memories are gonna come back up, and hopefully, you don't get completely re-traumatized by everything that you've already been through and have to re-heal through it all again, because that sucks. I've been there. It's not fun. But once you get past all that and you get to the point where you're free and you can just wake up and not feel stressed, you can wake up and be yourself. You can wake up and just be calm. There's no there's no hustle and bustle. There's no, you know, ignorant people that you have to deal with. And just, yeah. And even if you do, even if you're at work and you have to deal with ignorant people, you know what? Take my advice. Just tell them to have the day they deserve and walk away. Brush it off. Like, you don't need that crap. Do yourself a big favor in 2026 and take control of your mental health. Get on Google and start researching. Get yourself a journal and write things down, because when you go to your first session, whether it's in a week, a month, or a year from now, you don't want to miss out on being able to talk about as much as you possibly can and give that counselor as much information as you can, because usually it's only like an hour session. So get yourself a journal and write things down so you don't forget all these major points that you want to talk about. And as you're doing that, you're going to notice that now these thoughts are they're still there. They're always going to be there, but they're kind of a little less than what they used to be. You don't feel as pained by them or as stressed by them because you wrote them down and you're getting them out of your mind and you're clearing room for other things that you might not have thought of because everything else was blocking the way for your brain to process anything else. Our brains can only take so much at a time, and it's literally just sometimes going to stop functioning until you can get past the situation that you're in. So, pat yourself on the back and pick up that phone and call somebody and get help. Get your mental health on track this year. If you do anything for yourself, do that, because once you get past, like I said, once you get past all that craziness, all that, doubt and worries and trauma and whatever your situation might be, and you get the freedom to be yourself and to just live your life as you see fit and not worry about anybody else or what they think. Their opinions are just that. They are opinions. And I know words can hurt sometimes more than, being punched in the face. Words are, those scars that are inner wounds that we have to learn to heal. So no matter what you're going through right now, do yourself a big favor and get the help that you need if you feel that you need it. So go, again, go on Google and search your, your issues, the things that you are trying to get through, and know that you're not alone. There are many of wonderful groups, even on, Facebook, many of mental health awareness groups that you can join. And if you're feeling alone, and some of them are, some of these groups are private. If you don't want someone on your Facebook or whatever to see that you've commented in a mental health group because you're embarrassed, or you don't want others to know that you're struggling, go to a private group. That way there it can't be shared from a private group, and you can have some confidence knowing that you have a place that you can turn to during the day, 100 times a day if you need it, until you get in to see that counselor. And that's it for today. Again, I apologize that that January 1st show didn't make it out there, but here we are, and we are back on track for 2026, and I will see you guys all next Thursday. Bye now.